Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. It's been a long time. If you're new here, welcome. We plan on getting you a lot of good content coming out here in the next couple of months. But there's reasons that we've been gone, and we kind of wanted to make an episode to just let people know that we're back, and we're going to be doing a Q&A episode today, followed by a book series coming up in the next few episodes. But this is Lead Well Wednesdays. It's a leadership podcast for the fire service, and what we like to do is we like to break down leadership principles and give you actionable steps to take to grow your influence within your firehouse and within your fire department. So I'm one of the hosts, John Velez. This is Brad Conrado. We've had a couple episodes already up on the podcast sites like Spotify and Apple and YouTube. So go make sure you go back and listen to those. But other than that, Brad, how's it going, dude?
Pretty good. It's good to be back on.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. And like I said, I've personally been quiet on social media for the last few months, and it's all been with a lot of intentionality, and just trying to focus on home life. And we've had both of us actually have had a couple exciting things happen. What happened recently to you that everyone needs to know about now?
We came out of the closet, right?
No, I didn't. I'm still there.
No, recently promoted, made lieutenant, after a lot of thought and prayer, took a position in the training division, ship training officer about, was that 6 months? No, it's been longer than 6 months.
Yeah, we're
Back in
coming up
April.
on a year, dude.
Yeah, gosh. Did that and recently promoted to lieutenant by rank in the last month. So trying to get my feet under me on that regard.
Yeah, and it might only seem like a month, but we promoted 3 months ago at this point, 2 months
Wow.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and just kind of obviously, if you've promoted through the fire service or in your fire department, you understand that like studying takes up the majority of your life. And then if you couple that with anything else, like a family, like your time's pretty consumed. And I know Brad believes the same thing I do, but we do this stuff for fun and we do this to add value to the fire service. But this is not a big priority in our life. And we'll do this when we can. And so, yeah, for me, my wife was pregnant, I think, probably the last time that we did an episode, and we had our baby and had a bit of a NICU stay. And then, yeah, I made the decision to promote to driver and still very much getting my feet wet for that. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be in January. And I think we promoted back in October. So we're going on 3 months in our new roles. And I think we're finally ready and getting to a point in our life to where we can sit down and make some good content for you guys and have some more really good conversations about leadership. And just to circle back a little bit, like I said, if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for listening in. We believe the principle that leadership is influence. It's nothing more, nothing less, and that's what we talk about here. Is how do we build and maintain that influence, regardless of rank, regardless of your title or your time on the job. So we're going to kind of do a Q&A episode here. We got a couple good questions lined out for you. We'll probably both answer some. Maybe one of us will just answer one or the other, and we'll go from there. So the first question we're going to answer today is, what is the difference between rank, authority, and influence in the fire service, and which one matters the most? And I'm just going to kick it to Brad first.
Rank, authority, and influence, and which one matters most? So I think in the fire service, which you said it, that's leadership is influence. And so to me, I feel like that's the one that matters the most. I think a lot of times we blur that line in the fire service and just in life in general, is people think once they assume rank, they assume authority, which is true. And that's kind of where we get the conversation you probably heard us talk about in the past, like formal authority and informal, or a formal rank and informal rank when we're talking about leadership. A lot of leadership, whether we're talking about the firefighter or the driver, or the company officer really and higher, we're talking about informal leadership, or informal authority, informal influence. And a lot of times, once you promote to company officer, once you make company officer, when we start talking about the company officer role or higher, is where we start to get into ranking authority, formal authority, and some depending on what department you're in, that could be at the driver rank or whatever that mid-level management position is. Uh, and we feel like once we get into that position, then we kind of have to now assume responsibility, now assume authority, and really it starts as a firefighter. That's when you start gaining influence. That's when you start, you know, or should start setting goals and achieving things in leadership that you want to do. And I think it gets a little blurry as far as once you let's see, what am I trying to say? Once you get into an officer rank, a lot of people feel like now is when I need to lead. Now is when, and maybe not even lead, but now is when I need to assume responsibility. Um, and it's not true.
Right.
I feel like it could happen at any rate.
Yeah, I think the we can look across the fire service and probably at a couple of our personal relationship and see some guys that have promoted through the ranks, and then all of a sudden they try to flip a switch, right? They try to, they're the fun, outgoing, like zero responsibility guy, kind of like the joke about being that driver, right? It's the best position because it's either above you or below you. And they love that part of it.
Thanks, Logan.
Yeah, yeah, and they live that lifestyle as a driver, and and then they don't do it jokingly. Like they're serious about that. And the
Sure.
moment that they promote into that formal company officer role, they try to flip a switch, and now it's like, hey, we're doing things this way. And the guys that know, they've known you, like you've been at the job on the job for some time now, and they know who you are. But if you're sitting there as a fireman, as a driver, putting in the work and building the influence with the guys, like when you promote to company officer, when it comes to influence, the only thing that you've gained is
Formal authority.
formal authority.
Right.
And so when it comes to the question, what's the difference between rank, authority, and influence? Like
Yeah.
rank, that's just whatever your title is, right? And in all reality, sure, it has a little bit of weight. It carries a weight a little bit, but doesn't mean a lot. Authority, that means a lot. That's I say something and you do it. And influence is where I think is the most at because not only will you listen to what I say and tell you to do, but you also trust that I have it in my own, in my own heart that I'm telling you to do something for the right reasons.
And for your benefit, to add value to you or to add value to the tribe or
That's right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question. I like that one. So we'll just roll into the next one. I think in the fire service, we can all relate to this question, and it says, how should officers lead or how should officers handle high performers who are also toxic to the culture? So these guys are really good performers on the fire ground. They're really good firemen, but in the firehouse or within the fire department, they're just super toxic. And I think we could all build a picture in our head of what that looks like, but um, they're probably not the best person you want on your crew when it's downtime.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a sticky spot because it depends. Okay, so like I am an officer now. I have not been in a formal capacity on the rig or dealing with a company of my own, but at the driver level, and we've experienced these people. We have them in our department. Everybody's got them, and I think like you got to figure out like what's causing the toxicity. Like as a leader, you don't have to be the company officer, though. I think it is the company officer's responsibility to recognize that, like we've said on here, like as a leader, as a formal leader, right, as a company officer, a chief, if you recognize the problem and you don't fix the problem, you are the problem.
Right.
So like we have to address the problem. And even if there's a high performer, like it doesn't matter your skill on the fire ground, like or in the job. Like if you're causing problems at the station level, it needs to be addressed. So I would say that's how I would want to go about that is hopefully at the company officer rank, as a later step, but as a driver, as a firefighter, if you're seeing somebody that's causing problems in the firehouse, it's a cancer. Like
Yeah.
you need to address it. You need to talk to them and figure out what the issue is. And if it's just their personality, like man, it doesn't matter how good you are on the fire ground. Like if you create a toxic culture, like that impacts morale, that impacts so many things just past um, you know, skill level functionality on the fire ground. Like they need to go, like you want to fix the problem, but if you can't fix the problem, like they need to find another place to
Yeah. And I think this
go.
this conversation or this specific question, the way I've built it in my head is there's like different tiers to it because for a lot of people, there's reasons why people are toxic. Like there's a root cause. And then like you have like, and I personally believe that these are the few majority or like the very few minority of people, like maybe even less than the 1% of toxic people are just truly toxic. They're evil people. And those are the people that you don't want to be around. I think everybody else requires work, and something that I've always heard in the past is if you have those people, is give them authority in a way of like they're obviously high performers, so they know what they're doing on the fire ground or on the job. So give them ownership. That's the word I was looking for. Give them ownership of something. So allow them to teach a lot of classes or put together a bunch of classes or trainings for the company. And
Mhm.
then I think this just goes back, and you probably hear it a million times through this podcast, but that's what this whole thing is about, is building influence. So how can you as a leader build influence with that toxic guy to be able to have that tough conversation to be like, hey, dude, like every time we have a bad call, like you knock it out of the park, but
Mhm.
these guys hate working with you,
Yeah.
and this is why. And we need to work on these things if you want to remain here. Because I feel like the problem is in the fire service, is, at least, is we have these people and we just let them hang around.
Mhm.
And just like you said, they're a cancer. So what happens to cancer if you just let it hang out?
Yeah.
Eventually it consumes, which leads us to the quote, like, you become what you allow, right? If you are allowing that within your company, eventually that one guy is going to spread to all five, all six, all eight guys in your firehouse.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not a good spot to be in.
No.
So I think as a company officer, like, and obviously this is me projecting or whatever, speaking to a company officer role, I think you have to first and foremost work on the relationship with that guy and then be able to have that tough conversation and tell them like, hey, dude, you were really good at this job and I'd hate to lose you. And these guys would hate to lose you as a person to rely on the fire ground or, a wreck or whatever the call is. They hate being at the firehouse with you. And
Yeah.
here's why.
And like, trying to think what I'm trying to say. There's I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have systemically, not just in our department, but systemically in the fire services is once you assume that role of a company officer, that's where we kind of lean on the company officer to like, okay, you got to handle that problem. Like
Mhm.
you got a toxic guy in the firehouse, like it's your responsibility, boss, to go deal with that. And I would agree with that statement, but I would also say that it is all of our responsibility to address that. And when we talk about leadership, we talk about influence, like it starts by caring about people. Like if you want to build rapport with people, they have to know that you have to care, right? That you care about them. So once you start building that relationship, then you can have, like you said, the tough conversation and it needs to happen, right? And I think a lot of the times we're scared, whether it's, at any rank, we're scared to have that tough conversation because we don't want to damage a relationship that we have potentially built there. But if I can encourage you, if you are a boss or at any rank, um, have that tough conversation. You need to have that conversation because, again, and it goes back to what we said a second ago. If you don't fix the problem, you become the problem. If we see the problem, we need to address the problem.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, it's going to kill what we have. If you've built a crew, if you've got good morale, if you've got good culture, that is slowly going to head in the opposite direction if you don't address it.
Yeah.
And man, it's this big scary thing, but it's really not. Like if you approach it in a way that you're leading with love and you have that difficult conversation, like it's going to be tough in the moment, right? But I promise it's going to make things better.
No, I agree. Sticking with the theme of like culture within the firehouse, let's move on to the next question. Says, how can leaders intentionally build and protect a positive culture instead of just leaving it to chance? Um, I'll throw this out there.
Yeah.
We kind of did this thing at FDIC last year, and the whole thing was built on culture by design and not just by default. Shout out to Chief Candace Ashby for stealing that one, but we stole it unintentionally. We didn't know that was, she said that in her class, to be fair. But yeah, culture by design, not by default. And I think when it comes to building and protecting that positive culture, it goes back to what I just said on the last question. Like we become what we allow, right? And as a company officer, like this is where we gotta get back into that authority. Like as a company officer, I have the authority to tell you this is what we will do.
Hmm.
It kind of gets different in the informal side of things, but as a company officer, like we will do this. We will go stretch the line every day. We will go ladder a building every day. Um,
Right.
at dinner time, we will not have our phones out, or something like that. But I think it's exactly that, being intentional about your actions and what you do in the firehouse.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like you have to be intentional about it. The solution is in the question. How do you intentionally protect culture? Like you do it right by design, by intentionality. And you set the standard. Yeah, as a company officer, you can set the formal standard. Like this is what the expectation is, and we will meet the expectation, and I will hold you accountable. That's my job to do that. But on an informal level, it's ours to take the vision that we have as a company and model that, right? Hold other people accountable, and that's the backbone. The the authority is extended through the company officer to the driver down to the firefighter um, to hold people accountable to that standard. And sometimes that's the driver holding the officer accountable to the standard that he's set, right? And that's not easy to do. But if you work for a good boss that recognizes that, has that perspective, then that's how you win.
All right, these next two questions are going to be geared more towards company officers, but um, I feel like we can at least spend one of them to a more informal type leadership as well. But we'll get into it. So the question is, how do you lead firefighters who are more experienced, more educated, or older than you?
Yeah, I think that is
A tough question.
well, it's textbook interview question. And I want to give an honest response to that and not a textbook interview response to that. Um, we all have them, whether it's they're older than you by a couple years or they're older than you by 10 years or they're more experienced you by, 10 years or 2 years, right? It doesn't matter. I think that you recognize as a company officer that you are holding a position of responsibility and authority. And it is to add value, to protect, to provide resources to the people that you serve on your company. That is the role and function. And so it's not to have an ego. It's not to have a perception of being more squared away or being better than. It is a recognition of self and purpose. And that purpose is to do that, provide protection, direction, and resources for the guys that you serve. And when you recognize what your function is, then you can actually tap into all the resources around you. It's not my job to be the best fireman on the rig. It's not my job to be the most skilled or the most versed in any one function. It is my job to recognize who is, and that may be me in different facets. But it may be the driver, it may be the firefighter. And I think when you recognize that as what your position is, then you can tap into those resources and it's nothing, dude, right? Like I'm there to serve. I'm not there to hold a perception of myself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that one of the most important parts is like for me is like when you get a new company officer or just from a crew standpoint, I think the biggest thing and I've been pretty blessed in this area is just you're coming as a new officer, you're coming in to their house and they kind of have their way of doing things. And I think, like I said, like a lot of these questions, we could answer this on multiple tiers, but let's just say like you're coming into a good company, a good crew, they do their job, they take care of their responsibilities, like they have their way of doing things. And I think where I've seen and talked to firemen that have had this issue, like a big problem is they come in and they just try to drop the hammer. Like what and it makes the guys feel like what they've been doing for the last 3 to 5 years or however long they've been together, they've been doing it wrong.
Mm,
And so they come in and they try to drop the hammer. It's like, nope, this is what we're doing now. And it's like those guys know the station. They kind of know their daily routine and where and when they can fit all those pieces together
mm.
and still have the important parts like training, like, family time and all of these things that are important at the firehouse. And if you come in and you just drop the hammer and wipe away everything that crew's been doing, um, those guys take it poorly. At least in my opinion, it wouldn't go very well. I've never personally had to deal with that, but yeah, you got to come in and listen to the guys and engage where they're at. Because I feel like a lot of people, and I feel like I would be the same way if I'm being honest. Like, get newly promoted to a company officer, I get a crew, and I'm like, all right, let's go. It's hammer time, and we're going, 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 going. But what you didn't realize is the last 6 months, these guys have been swamped with stuff, and you have no idea where they are as far as education level, skill level, where they are in their personal life or anything.
Sure.
And I think the important thing is like take a time to just kind of uh, get the vibe a little bit and understand where everybody is professionally and personally.
So I think a really good analogy that's coming to mind, maybe not. As a new company officer, you're coming into a crew, like you said, and the analogy that I'll give is let's say we're working in a kitchen at a five-star restaurant and we're making a meal. right? You're coming in and the meal's already been started. We're back there, we're cooking, we're doing stuff, we're making stuff, and you're the new guy that shows in and you got to figure out where to jump in. And I think that a lot of company officers actually do this well. They come in and they keep their mouth shut. They just get they get a vibe check. They see, okay, what meal are we cooking, right? What's everybody? And I think that is what needs to be done. Come in and get it, figure out your guys, right? Start to build that rapport, figure out what makes them tick. They have families, whatever, like get to the bottom of that. But I think the problem is you got to come in, and we've talked about casting vision, right? We got to understand what our mission is, and then we got to cast a vision to how to execute that mission. And I think as a company officer, if you come in to the kitchen and you see that a meal is being cooked, you got to figure out, is this the right meal that's being cooked, right? Does this match our mission as a fire department, as a company? Like, and if not, then I need to start casting vision to that mission. That doesn't mean I need to throw the whole meal out, but maybe we're making the wrong sides and we got the main course right. Okay. Yeah. You got to see how you can kind of start to develop that play and get buy-in to that, instead of just throwing out the whole meal and starting over and cook the same damn thing. Right. Like you can't do that. You have to come in and like you said, and get the vibe. And I think that again, a lot of company officers do that well, but what I see as a problem is they come in, they get the vibe, and then they throw the whole meal out and they point at everybody in a different direction, and everybody's like, "What's going on?"
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think you know this, but obviously no one listening does. But like, I'm kind of walking through this a little bit right now, and I could throw a little bit of praise towards my new company officer, uh, Hunter, and he did this really well.
I think so.
He's done this really well. He's came into our company and he said, "Guys, like, you guys have a really good thing going here." He said, "And I'm just here to fall in line." And he's done a really good job at us telling him, this is our standard. We're going to do this. And so far, which, we're pretty new into it, but he's done a really good job at coming in, even on days where I felt like we could take the day off, and saying, hey, we're going to stretch line. We're going to go to the drill field and train. Like he's been able to really fall into what we're doing and then provide some really good insight on some stuff. And he's done exactly this. He's started to get to know our families and like asking good questions and having one-on-one conversations with people. And, like I said, I've been super blessed between the two full-time company officers that I've had. And my new captain has done this really, really well is just come in and kind of sat back and kept their mouth shut. And then he's provided a few nudges, possibly to me in certain areas, but that like as a company officer, like that's what you need to do, in my opinion, at least. So
Sure.
no, yeah. Okay, moving on. So more sticking to new company officers. What are some common leadership mistakes that new officers make and how can they avoid them early on?
I think the first that comes to mind is jumping into a new company officer role is a lot of times what you see new company officers do is feel like they have to exude a certain perception. I feel like they have to be some kind of way. I think this is where a lot of guys get the rap of like, you forgot where you came from. You got the guy that like was never in uniform, slept in the mornings, like was late to the rig when a call comes in, like whatever, and then all of a sudden they promote to company officer. And now it's like, okay, everybody's got to be in uniform. Everybody's got to do this. Everybody's got to do that. And it's like, bro, literally 2 weeks ago, like you were not doing that. So, and I think that comes from like, okay, and not that it's entirely wrong, but I think once people step into that role, they're like, okay, I have to have a perception, right? And I don't think it's as much about the perception as it is about the character of the individual. Like one person that I've seen do this really well is Winchell, right? Like
Yeah.
you put bars on the guy, but nothing changed. You know what I mean? And that comes from years of building character and doing things away and holding himself accountable to do the job. Um, I've seen that guy do it really, really well. And some people do, but I think how you avoid that, one of the biggest leadership pitfalls, I think, is stepping in and feeling like you have to exude a perception. And what it does is it causes a lot of issues. They feel like they need to be the most squared away, right? The most knowledgeable, when it comes to different skills on the fire ground. And not that and again, back to what we said a second ago, I don't have to be the most knowledgeable. I don't have to be the strongest individual at any one facet of the job, but I need to recognize where strength is and tap into that strength.
Yeah.
If John Velez is my driver on the rig and this dude is the best at stretching lines or forcible entry or knows different things, like I need to tap into that. That's a resource, right? I don't have to be the guy that knows everything about everything. And I think new company officers have an intuition about them where they feel like they need to be.
Mhm.
And what that ends up doing is it runs off talent from the company,
Yeah.
right? Because if John Velez is the most squared away, but I feel like I have to, right? Well, I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to give the response. I'm going to do the thing instead of tapping into the resource and allowing the guy because of what I feel like it may make me look
Yeah.
like less than or no. And I think that it does the exact opposite. It actually shows incredible leadership to walk in humility and do that. I worked for a boss, Captain Rust, for a lot of years, and I think that he actually did this really well. Um, it comes from a confidence in who you are as a company officer and knowing that I have strengths, I have weaknesses, and I
Mhm.
know what those are, and I'm confident in my role and function. So I can tap into those other resources and use those for the betterment of the company. It's not
Yeah.
about me, it's about us.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest. I mean, obviously there's probably 1,000, but that's probably one of the biggest that I've seen cause detriment to a company, to morale, to culture, run people off, not let people feel valued,
Yeah.
is that right there.
I think my answer is the same, but I just framed it in a different way of like thinking is to me, it's the control part of it. As a new company officer, I think they're, and I don't want to say fearful, but they're in a way, they're fearful that they're going to fail. So they just want to have control of every little thing that their company does, right? From this is the training that we're going to do, this is how we're going to run these calls. And like they fail to tap into the resources on the crew because they just don't want to relinquish that control. And it's not because they're a controlling person,
Right.
but it's because they're still trying to figure this whole thing out. And I don't know if that, I mean, like I said, it's the same answer, but I just always found it as like a control problem more than anything is like, they just want things to go. They're so scared to be in trouble, like,
Sure.
and I would be too, and I'm going to be. But when we know about these things, then we're like, okay, like now I know that like I have this guy that's really good at throwing ladders. This just like everything you just said. I don't have to get into it, but yeah. All right, let's move on. So next question. How should informal leaders handle disagreements with the company officer, but without undermining authority or the culture?
That's a good question. I think it comes from a strong officer that sets that standard. I think you, like we talk about, once we know what the mission is and you start casting vision, that company officer needs to be really effective at communicating what that is. And then I think that that's how you hold the bottom line as an informal leader, as a driver, a firefighter at that level. Like, what is the mission? What's the vision that's being cast for me from the company officer? What does he want us to do? What does he want us to look like? What's our day to day? And then holding myself accountable to that. I feel like that's how you
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. And I think, I feel like I've been in this situation a few times and not saying that I've handled it right or wrong, but I feel like it's been the correct way because it's worked out. But from what I believe to be true in the fire service and how we should operate on the fire ground, obviously people do things a lot differently. It doesn't matter where you look. Like people are just going to accomplish things in a different task, and it's something that I've learned from you is like first of all, I think you have to understand as the informal guy that um, the fire ground is not the place to ask questions. As a fireman, you are to be a point and shoot guy until you can operate. I say independently without freelancing, obviously whatever your company officer says, like you're going to accomplish as long, and we can have a safety conversation as long as it's not going to get you killed, whatever. Like they say jump and you ask how high, and that should be the only question that you ask.
Right.
Um, Obviously with experience, then you can kind of, like I said, work independently, but there's probably going to be some calls that your company officer makes that you disagree with, but the fire ground is not the place to ask those questions. What has worked well for me in the past is after the call's over with, right? Um, Taking them aside, not asking them in front of the entire company and asking like what made them think, just asking good questions. I don't have to get into specific questions, but what was going through their head? What was making them think that the call that they made was the right one? And then
Hmm.
having that conversation, right? Because there's been times where I thought that I understood something and thought that the way that I had in my head to do something was the right way. And then they tell me an answer and I'm like, I didn't even think about that
Yeah.
because I am they are a company officer. If they're a company officer, in the majority of cases, at least for me, they're going to have way more experience than I do. And so, first and foremost, understanding what their frame of thought was, but then just waiting for a response because even if it's not something that you still agree with, you're still going to learn something from that. because it's
Mhm.
just a different way of doing things.
And I think you have to be careful too. Like, I agree with that. I think you have to be careful too, though, because you don't want to have the perception that you're questioning their judgment,
Right.
you know? So I think you have to be upfront and honest with them. And I think, again, transparency is how we win in life. And I think you have
Yeah.
to be transparent with it and just, don't have the perception that you're questioning, but maybe you come to them and you're like, hey, you made this call. And I'm going to be honest, like, I don't know why you made this call. Help me
Right.
understand. I'm not questioning, and maybe say that. Like, I'm not questioning your judgment. I really want to understand. I want to grow. I want to be better.
Yeah.
Tell me what you were thinking. One good question I felt like I've asked uh, people that are more seasoned than me, that are further along with me, is what was going through your head in that moment when you made that call?
Mhm.
Because I think you start to get a frame of the system and process that they were going through to make that call. Like, hey, I thought that we should have stretched Alpha and gone in the front door, and you said, hey, we want to go inside Charlie. Like, run me through, like, I'm not questioning you, I'm not saying that was the wrong call. I'm just curious, like, what was going through your head in that moment when you said, "No, let's go Charlie instead of Alpha?"
Yeah.
Because then you'll get a real quick, "Well, I saw this, I saw this, I saw okay, well, I didn't see that." And again, like you
Exactly.
said, like, I may have seen everything that you saw, and I may still agree with that judgment call,
Yeah.
but I just wanna know where you stand on it so I can say, "Okay, if this is how he thinks, this is the play, like, I can
Yeah.
do that next time, so I'm not I'm one more step ahead for that boss instead of,
Yeah.
you know, feel like I'm a little bit behind."
Yeah. I think to emphasize my answer to that question, it would be the emphasis on good questions. So ask good questions. Don't question.
Right.
Don't question, their judgment or whatever. You have to make sure your questions are good.
Seek to understand,
Yes.
right? What's
Yeah.
the seek first to understand, then to be understood?
That's right. Okay. So next question. How can informal leaders mentor probies and younger firefighters in a way that builds them up instead of breaking them down?
Ooh,
Yeah, this is a good one because, like historically in the fire service, we give probies a hard time.
yes.
We don't bully them, but we give them a hard
Yes,
time.
we do.
And I think that we have to preserve that part of the fire service. I feel like I know how we're probably both going to answer this question. And so I just want to preface this. We have to preserve that part of the fire service. We have to
Mhm,
find a way to be able to preserve that tradition of the fire service because it is a rite of passage,
mhm.
but not cross that line.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between hazing and, like, being a jerk, busting each other's chops, right? Like, I think that whole and this conversation's been talked about in different various, veins of podcasts, fire service podcasts, but, like, it used to be like we would bust your chops because we want to get to know you. We want to see what makes you tick. We want to see, or maybe we're trying to build up a little bit of resiliency. That's kind of why that happened. But there was always a building up phase after the tearing down. I think, like, there's a little bit of tearing down, a little bit of ball busting, a little bit of chop smashing, just so you could kind of get again do that. But then there was a building up, right? Like, I'm gonna make fun of you a little bit and just bust your chops because we're dudes. That's what dudes do. But then I'm gonna educate you, right? I'm gonna mentor you. I'm gonna take you under my wing and learn. Like, but if there's no building up, then you're just being a jerk.
Yeah.
Then you're just being a douche, and that does nothing, right? That adds no value to people. You're literally just being a loser.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
don't do that. So I definitely agree. Like, that's part of the tradition of the fire service to do that. But I think that's where people miss the mark is then they're just a douchebag,
Yeah.
right? We can't just be a douche. We're there to teach. We're there to educate. We're there to uh, build up and help grow.
Yeah. And fortunately, like we've had a lot of rookies come through our fire department. And I say fortunately, just because like we get to do this often and see, you know, I think we could all agree, doesn't matter what department you work for, there's people that don't get this right. They're just tear down, tear down, tear down. And then they wonder why these guys aren't performing well. Um, but I've seen like this work out so well with so many different people. And one thing that I found successful is like day one, the first day that they're in your firehouse, is have that conversation with them. Like, hey, um, I'm so glad you're here. I care about you. Thank you for being here. And then just give them your expectations or the firehouse expectations for the day, and let them understand that like, hey, we're gonna bust your chops. We're gonna give you a hard time, but as long as they know that you care about them and their success and their growth, then I don't want to say everything is fair game, but then everything works out for the better because one of my favorite things, and I can throw a shout out on here, Nate Sherman. Like,
Mhm.
I bust that dude's balls because he's old and he's brand new, sorry, Nate. But it was cool because I took him to his first fire, seeing him grow through paramedic school and like then he's done FTO at my station.
Job.
And the other day, finally, the other day he kind of threw one back at me and I'm like, dang, bro, you ain't even checked off yet. And it was just a funny moment, and I can take that and well, because of the relationship that I've built with him.
Sure.
And I think that's where it all comes down to is yes, we want to give rookies hard times and we want to make sure that they're growing and we want them to have a taste of that tradition of the fire service. But at the same time, like we're building relationships. Those guys aren't going to be rookies forever. And the last thing that I want is a guy thinking that and I'm an asshole
Right.
because of the way I treated them as a rookie.
Sure.
And I was just putting that facade on because I wouldn't treat you like that. I wouldn't treat someone with the same tenure as me like that.
Mm.
So I want to just make sure that they understand that.
I think, yeah, I think the whole chop busting and everything, like it reminds me of the proverb, um, wh- when people come to me and they correct me, right? They see something and they're asking a question. Why did I do? As a new guy, let's say I'm a new guy, and you come to me, John, and you're like, "Hey, why did you do that?" Our first natural flesh reaction is to react and justify. Like, I want to explain my position. We've had this conversation before.
Hmm.
I want to explain my position, right? And I think a better frame of references is to recognize if somebody's coming to me, they've got two kind of reasons. They either are trying to inflate their own ego, which we can go into depth in that, or they're trying to actually help me, right? So if someone's coming to me and saying, "Hey, you need to change this," or "You're not doing this," and I feel like they're busting my chops, instead of reacting, I need to ask good questions,
Hmm.
right? And I need to figure out what's their motive. Because if people are coming to me, most of the time, right? We're all a family in the fire service, like, and most of the time it's because they see an opportunity to grow. But if every single time I react and justify, slowly, 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 they're going to start to say, "This guy's unteachable," and that's a scary moment, right? That's why hear in the firehouse, "Man, we bust your chops because we like you." Well, a more uh, formal way of putting that is we we are we are seeing what makes you tick because we see that there's opportunity to grow. We want to push back against that a little bit to see where the deficiencies are so we can attack those and we can build you up and make you stronger, whether it's emotionally resilient, whether it's skills based stuff that you're lacking in. Like, we want to help you grow. And I think that you can only do that once you start building a relationship. If a guy comes in day one and you're just busting his chops and you're really not trying to help him out, then you're gonna lose that, and he's not gonna hear anything you have to say,
Yeah.
and that's how we lose.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah. That's a good answer. All right. Last question. Last question. How do you know? I'm going to build this question up. So let's just say we're speaking to the guy that's been on the job somewhere between 3 to 5 years. They've been putting in the work. They've been trying to grow their influence with people. So how does that person know how much influence they have? And how do they gauge it? How do they know? How can they test the waters there?
How much influence they have?
Yeah. And the only thing that I have an answer, but it's only one answer and it's single faceted. So I'm really relying on you here is the times where it hasn't been intentional whatsoever. But obviously I've put in work to grow influence with people. And the times where I've walked away is like, oh, man, I actually do have some influence with that person is when they've came to me with questions
Mm,
that I felt like I shouldn't have been the one to answer. If that, within my role in the company, within my role in the department.
mm. I think it's hard for me to say I know how much influence I have. I think it kinda happens intuitively. I can speak to gaining influence, which I feel like is, uh something I don't wanna say is not intentional because it very much is intentional, but I feel like my influence has always increased when I intentionally try to grow in my personal life,
Yeah.
my personal walk. When I have been consistent in different things, when I have tried to when I have worked on myself, I feel like that has pushed out into gaining influence elsewhere. But I feel like if I've ever like tried to intentionally go gain influence, it's been through the building of relationships, just and not for selfish reasons. You know what I'm saying? Like it's because like I believe one of my purposes in life is to love others. And so if I can just be pointed in that direction and just we get a new guy at the station or I'm on a new crew and we got a new guy on the crew, like I just want to start building that relationship, right? See what makes him tick, talk to him. And I feel like that's where you start to gain influence. But how to measure that, which is your question, like I think that's difficult for me to answer because I don't really know, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes we kid ourselves because sometimes we think we have more influence than we do, and sometimes we don't realize we have as much influence as
Yeah.
we do. So I think it's a hard thing to gauge.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that's a good enough answer for that question because it is a really difficult it's a question that honestly I've asked myself several times. It's like, how do I know exactly how much influence I have with this person? And I don't know that there's not an answer to it,
Mm.
but I think it just happens over time. And like I said, through just these little through relationship building and through these little things, like I don't necessarily know I don't think it matters how much influence you have with them right now, but it just matters that you're growing in influence with that person. It matters that you're building that relationship. So regardless of where the level's at, as long as the needle's pointed up or pointed forward, like then you know that it's growing and you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, like I think people tend to gravitate towards people that they see them as where they want to be. Like if I see a guy that's doing the things that I want to do, or he's achieved a certain skill, or in a place or a walk of life that I want to be in, those are the people that we naturally gravitate towards. Whether it's through podcasts or through guys on the job that are better firemen in our book, what we perceive as better firemen than we are, and somewhere we want to go. Those are the people that we tend to gravitate towards. And I think that's why for me personally, when I've worked on my own personal growth, being better at the job, being more intentional about getting better and being consistent in physical fitness and being consistent in the way that I treat people, I feel like when I've worked on that, I feel like that's when people, and I don't do it to gain influence in that way, but I see when people, I think when people see that in me, they tend to gravitate towards that. So I'm not out there trying to scoop up influence and try to bring people under my wing intentionally in that way. But I feel like when someone comes into my life that I can tell, and I think it's a bit intuitive, I can tell is asking the right questions or wanting to dig a little deeper. That is the intuition. That's where you start to realize, like, okay, I have influence on this person. Now I have a choice what to do with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think just to add, because I feel like this could be a way longer conversation now that we're talking about this, but why not kind of have it? Um, I think people can tell your motives behind that, right? Like, not saying like I think we all want to grow influence with people, but how and how we do that, people could tell when it's forced. People could tell when it's authentic, right?
mhm.
And that's the big thing is like make sure that you're being authentic in the way that you're building influence with people. So
Yeah, people can see it. I don't care how dumb or smart you are. We talked about this.
yeah,
People can see right through inauthenticity. Like they can tell when you're being fake.
yeah,
They can tell when you're being genuine.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, that's good. Okay, well that's going to be all the questions for today. So what you have forward, like to look forward to from us, is we are about to do a series on a book, and the book is called Lead Like Jesus. It's written by Ken Blanchard, Phil Hodges. I'm going to try to throw a picture on the screen right now. But if you're just listening to this, you can literally just look it up on Amazon or Google. And we're going to do a deep dive into the book through the next several episodes and just go through there. So, Lead Like Jesus by Ken Blanchard and Phil Hodges. And what I'm going to do right now is limited availability. I only have 2 copies. But if you respond to this and tell me that you want the book, you have to share this episode and tag me in it, tag Tailboard Media Co. With it. And the first 2 people get the first 2 free copies of the book. But until then, remember the best leaders know the way, show the way, and go the way. Stay ready, stay humble, and we'll see you on the big one.